All right, let's talk about the invisible strings that connect a crisis happening somewhere else in the world directly to your wallet. We're going to break down how something happening thousands of miles away can, quietly mess with your personal finances. And more importantly, what you can actually do about it. Have you ever been at the gas pump just wincing as you watch those numbers spin up? And you're thinking, wait, didn't I hear something on the news about a conflict somewhere? Well, let me tell you, you are not imagining that connection. It is absolutely real, it's direct, and trust me, it goes way beyond just the gas station. And really, that gets to the core of what we're talking about today. It's like your entire financial life, your budget, your savings, even your biggest goals, is on this invisible global leash. And whenever the world economy gives that leash a tug, yeah, you're gonna feel the pull. See, you have to think of our global economy as this giant, incredibly interconnected machine. So when one little part breaks down, doesn't matter if it's a drought in Asia or some political decision made over in Europe, that shockwave, it travels all the way across continents and lands right in your bank account. So the big question is, how does this actually happen? Well, it's not some kind of magic, right? It's really just a domino effect, and it follows some pretty predictable paths. So let's break down the three main roads a global crisis takes to get from the news headlines straight to your front door. Okay, so here are our three domino chains. We've got the supply chain shudder, central bank contagion, and the commodity shock. And look, just understanding these three is the first huge step to protecting yourself. So let's dive into that first one. All right, the supply chain shudder. So think about that crazy intricate web that brings us all of our stuff, everything from our phones to our furniture. Well, this is what happens when that web gets a snag in it. A single problem in one country can literally bring production in another country to a grinding halt. Let me give you a perfect real-world example. Okay, imagine there's a drought in Taiwan. That slows down a factory that makes those tiny little semiconductor chips. Now, without those chips, car makers over in Detroit can't finish building their cars. So what happens? Suddenly, there's a shortage of new cars on the lot, and boom, the price of the car you've been eyeing just jumped. Just like that, a drought thousands of miles away made your new car more expensive. Okay, let's move on to our second path, central bank contagion. This one's interesting. I want you to think of the world's big central banks, like the US Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank, almost like they're in a choir together. To keep the whole global economy in harmony, if one of them starts seeing a higher note, like raising interest rates, the others, well, they feel a ton of pressure to join in and sing the same tune. So let's say the European Central Bank decides to raise its rates to fight inflation in Europe. Well, that immediately puts pressure on the US Fed to think about doing the exact same thing. And when the Fed raises rates, your mortgage rate, your car loan, your credit card rates, all of them start to climb. And the personal hit from that is, it's immediate. That brilliant plan you had to refinance your house and save a few $100 a month, poof. It can just evaporate into thin air. A single decision made in a boardroom in Frankfurt can end up tightening your monthly budget for years. Which brings us to our third, and maybe the most direct path of all, the commodity shock. Okay, so this is when you get a sudden, sharp price spike in a basic raw material. We're talking about things like oil or wheat or natural gas. And because these things are literally the building blocks of our entire economy, when their price changes, guess what? The cost of pretty much everything else changes right along with it. Yeah, the classic example here is always oil, right? Let's say some new sanctions limit oil exports from a major producer. All of a sudden, the global energy supply gets tight, and prices, they shoot up. And since oil is used to transport, everything, the cost to get food to your local grocery store just went up, and that single political decision means you are now paying more for bread, for milk, for coffee, you name it. And we're not talking about a small effect here. A commodity shock like that can easily blow a huge hole in a budget you've planned out so carefully. It can turn a $400 grocery bill into almost $500, and you haven't even bought a single extra thing. It is a direct hit straight to your wallet. Okay, I know that all sounds pretty daunting, right? But look, the point of walking through this isn't to scare you. It's the exact opposite. It's to empower you. Because while you can't stop these global tremors, you can absolutely build a financial life that's strong enough to withstand them. So let's talk about your defense plan. It really all comes down to a pretty simple three-step plan. Number one, insulate your portfolio. Number two, build a flexible goal system. And number three, develop your global dashboard. All right, let's break each of those down. First up, insulating your portfolio. Now, this does not mean just stuffing all your money into cash and hiding it under the mattress. Inflation would just eat that for lunch. The key here is to think of your investments like a car's suspension. You want a good shock absorber, not some rigid, brittle fortress that's just going to crack under the first bit of pressure. And what that really means is diversification. It's about owning a mix of different types of assets. Some stocks, some bonds, maybe even commodities through a low-cost fund. The key is that they don't all move in the same direction at the same time. So when one part of your portfolio takes a hit from a global shock, another part might be holding steady, or even be up a little, which really helps to soften the blow. All right, our second step is all about your mindset. You need to build a flexible system for your goals. Look, life is unpredictable. We all know that. And the global economy, even more so. A rigid plan is a fragile plan. It's just waiting to break. So the mantra you got to remember is this: adjust the plan, but don't abandon the goal. So what's the difference? Well, a rigid goal sounds like this: I must save $20,000 by next July, period. A flexible plan, on the other hand, sounds more like this: my goal is a new car. My plan has a core target, but the timeline can shift if it needs to. See the difference? When a setback hits, you don't just throw your hands up and quit, you adjust the path and keep going. And that brings us to our final step, number 3, develop your own global dashboard. And hey, you do not need a PhD in economics for this, I promise. All you need is a simple, personal early warning system so you can see what might be coming down the pike. Really, you only need to keep kind of a casual eye on 3 main things. First, global oil prices. Think of that as the pulse of inflation. Second, the US dollar strength index, because that's going to tell you about the cost of imported goods. And third, any big announcements from the Federal Reserve. That'll give you a hint about where interest rates are headed. That's it. This is not about trying to predict the future. It's just about being prepared for it. So let's bring this all home. Can you stop a drought, or a war, or a decision made by a central bank halfway around the world? No, of course not. The dominoes are going to fall. And this is the important part, that does not mean you have to be a victim. You can prepare. You can stand strong. And that right there is probably the single most important takeaway from all of this. Just by understanding these invisible strings that connect your wallet to the rest of the world, you gain the power to manage them. You are far, far from powerless in this story. By insulating your finances, staying flexible with your goals, and just keeping an eye on a few key signals, you can build a financial life that isn't fragile, it's shock resistant. The global dominoes, yeah, they'll keep falling, but they don't have to knock you down.